Before we start the video, a large thank you to Manuel Perez for their support on Patreon. I hope you enjoy the video, my friend. And as always, a massive thank you to Halo Burner and Ryan Bellin for their continued and immense support to the channel on Patreon. It is greatly appreciated, gentlemen, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, and today we are going to begin our storage system. So let's start by going to the Player UI Manager and making a window here for the player storage. So basically you're going to interact with the site of grace, and you can open up this menu and put any items from your inventory into the storage box. So I'm going to call it Storage Manager, and I'm going to remove the Player UI Equip Manager because I duplicated it. And just ignore this background stuff because I'm going to delete it here in a second, but I'm going to make a Player UI Storage Manager script on the main game object here. And then I'm going to open that up and we're going to start writing a little bit of code. So I'm going to delete the update and start functionality and drop in my namespace as is per tradition. And I want to make this derived from my Player UI Manager, but first I want to add it to my Player UI Manager main script here so we can close the menu whenever we close out any other main menu. So I'll make a variable Player UI Storage Manager, going to hide it in the inspector because I don't need to see it. Going to call it Player UI Storage Manager, and on awake, just like everything else, I'm going to say Player UI Storage Manager is equal to get component in children. Now under close all menu windows, I'm going to say Player UI Storage Manager, and then I'm going to wait because I have to add it, or rather make it derive from the base class. Let's go do that real quick first. So over here, we're going to say, instead of mono behavior, it's going to be Player UI Menu. And now we can save that and go back here, and we can say close after fixed frame. All right, let's save that, go back into the Player UI. I'm going to make an empty game object here called Menu. I'm going to alt click here and expand it so it's the size of my canvas. And then I'm going to drag it in here for my menu variable. Now I'm going to create another empty game object here. I'm going to call this background. And this is where it's going to get a little bit, programmer or coder UI-esque. Not going to make this look pretty. Going to make it the whole size of the background again. I'm going to copy the background color of my other menu so at least it's somewhat consistent. And again, if you're taking the time to do your UI, I definitely encourage you to take your time and make this look pretty. But if you're just getting the logic done first, then don't worry about it. So I am going to make another image here. Make sure to untick raycast target for these, by the way, because you don't need that on. And I want to basically make this so 2/3 of my screen is the player storage and the storage in the chest, because I leave another third to the right there in case you want to add like item descriptions or details for your highlighted item. But because of that, I'm going to make it, say, I don't know, 1200 by 675, and I'm probably going to change these values a bit. I'm just going to keep resizing it until it looks somewhat serviceable. Again, not going to spend too much time in this because you could really spend hours on UI and making it look nice and kind of framing everything properly. So I'm just going to get a rough frame of what I want, though. I want categories, so I want to be able to just basically select the items that appear in your inventory and storage based on their category. Same thing we do with shops. And I want a window for, like I said, the player inventory and then the storage inventory, because we're going to cycle back and forth between those. So I want the categories here to rest on top of those. So we know because of that, I'm going to want a vertical layout group to keep it all kind of linked together. But I'm also going to want a separate, possibly a horizontal layout group for the next two. So what we're going to do is put another box below categories, which I will call item storage. And this is all under the items game object, by the way. And then within the item storage itself, what I want to do, and make sure you want to take raycast target, is create two more of these blocks, I'll say, and one for the inventory and one for the storage itself. So the idea is the item storage is the parent object for the player inventory and the storage inventory, and from there we can add a horizontal layout group to size them properly. And then the item categories is the parent object for all the individual category selection buttons that we can add later on. So I'm going to make the player inventory and the storage inventory about half of the size, give or take, of maybe a little bit, leave a little bit of buffer, of the parent object, item storage. And again, I'm going to call it player inventory and storage inventory. And then once that's set up, I'm going to add a horizontal layout group here like so, and just play with the settings until it's something that you enjoy. I'm going to put mine on middle center for chart alignment. I'm going to space out a little bit. And I don't like that there's a buffer on the right side that's uneven from the center, so I'm probably going to increase the size of that just a little bit, but again, I'm not going to spend too much time in this. So I will now go over to the items category and add a vertical layout group. And this is going to stack the main item category on top of the item storage selection. And then you can see here I have my item categories over here, and then I have my storage windows down here. So it should all stick together nicely because of the way I have these layout groups situated. So I am going to now go over to my item categories and add a component. I'm at a horizontal layout group. I'm going to say middle left, and I'm going to get rid of the spacing, and I add some buffer to the size too, because now watch, if I go over and yoink from our shop manager, the item categories we made earlier, because we're going to reuse these again for the storage. I can paste these here like that, and this is how basically it's going to look. Let's make that not stick to the side perfectly. We'll give it like 25 units of space there. Okay, so I also want a title though. I want a title for both of the categories. I'm just looking at a picture of the Elden Ring storage right now, and I'm going to obviously copy that as this tutorial series is Elden Ring in Unity. So they have a title and an item name for each category. So basically, there's a title and an item name in both the player and the storage windows here. So what I want to do is basically get two text fields. And thinking about this now, like I need to kind of divide this into two blocks. So we're at the text field first. We got inventory, so this is going to be the title, right? And then below that, we're also going to have the item name that you're currently highlighting. So in the inventory window, if you're highlighting an iron full helmet, this will say inventory, and then below that, iron full helmet. Likewise, if you're in the storage menu, it's going to be on the other side over here, and it's going to say the same thing, but the storage menu will be the title. So I can't just drag this in the player inventory, because you can see here it kind of breaks everything. But what I can do to do one better is I can actually create an empty game object inside the storage information and call this inventory. And then I can basically take this width and divide it by 2 like that. And that gives me that. And I can parent this to the left like so and drag this over here, right? And now I'll take the inventory title and inventory highlight, put that in there, boom, that's our inventory's title, and then I can duplicate that and call it storage, and then drag it over here to the right, and then we have the right title. Obviously, instead of parenting that or anchoring that, I can just put a horizontal layout group here as well. But then I'm going to put a vertical layout group on both of these, and I'll say middle left. And I'm sure you can see here what I'm trying to get at. So the first text is going to be the title, the second text is going to be the item name that you're highlighting. So if I were to put, say, I'll just put item name here for now. And let's make the title color a little bit different so the UI is just a bit more easy to read. I usually like putting the non-changeable text as a darker color, and the text that varies when you highlight certain objects as the lighter color, but that's just preference. It doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to do the same thing I did on this title over here on the other side as well. There we go. And obviously this is an inventory, this one's storage. And then I can change this to item name as well. So this is very ugly, horrendous looking programmer UI, obviously, but it will be serviceable. But now, if we check our height, we duplicated our item categories, which has a height of 100. Let me just also mess around with this vertical layer group for a sec. So basically, you can see that our inventories are kind of bleeding to the bottom of the UI now. We need to basically expand the parent object's height by adding 100 to it. So if I go up here to height and click plus 100, there we go. You can see it perfectly fits inside the box, and we're good to go. Okay, so if I go to my equipment manager here, I can actually yoink the viewport section here, which will save us a bit of time for setting up the inventory. So if I copy that, we're going to modify a little bit. This is basically what populates our inventory. So we can copy that and we can right click and paste right here under the player inventory, right? And now we can zero this out, but it doesn't matter because we're just going to take the components off it. So take the scroll rect and copy it and paste it on the player's inventory like so. And then take the UI matte scroll wheel to selected button and paste that on the player's inventory. And then we can delete those two objects off of this game object. And we can drag out everything that's not the background, so the viewport and the scroll bar vertical, and then we can delete the old objects. Now what we have is this right here. So now all we got to do is size this to the window. So you can stretch it and snap it if you want to, or you can drag it in manually, or you can snap it up and down. But I'm just going to take the vertical scroll bar, for example, and I will just snap that to the size of the window like that. And then I will take the viewport and do the same thing, just zero it out because it's already on stretch. Now it's the size of the window. All right, cool. So that should work when we go to set it up. We'll see if there's any problems. We'll deal with that as they arise. Now, I am going to basically make sure that the content bar is the same width, but the height goes way down as much as it needs to because this is going to change anyway depending on what we have in our inventory. Now, if we go to the Player UI Storage Manager, the script that is, I'm going to override Open Menu, and I'm going to override Open Menu after fixed frame. And right below that, I'm going to make a private void. I'm going to call this populate inventory, but we're not going to write a single line of code for that just now. We're going to come back to that. But however, on open menu after fixed frame and open menu, we will call populate inventory, because either way, whenever you open the menu, you have to populate the inventory. So go to your shop inventory slot we made in the last videos and duplicate it. But first, actually, I'm going to make a folder for storage menu under my prefabs UI. But basically, we're going to make a prefab for an inventory slot that we're going to populate in our storage menu. And I will call this storage inventory slot. And again, this is a duplication of the shop right now, so you can see we have all the shop stuff on it. But I'm going to add a new script called UI storage inventory slot. And I'm basically going to set this up very similar to how I did the shop inventory slot. So delete the start and update functionality, dropping your namespace as is per tradition, and I'm going to make this derived from UI inventory slot, so it gets all that add item, remove item, whatever, etc., etc. I'm going to copy the variables here from my old inventory slot and paste them on the new script we just made, and then remove the old script. And that's looking good. Okay, cool. Now over here on the Player UI Storage Manager, let's make a serializable field here for the inventory window parent. And this is going to be a game object, but this is basically going to be where you instantiate all of these inventory slots. And obviously we need something to instantiate. I'm actually going to change this name, by the way, to inventory slot instantiation parents. And I should probably call that player inventory instantiation parent, because there's going to be a storage instantiation parent as well in the future. So I will make a serializable field now for a game object of the inventory slot. We're going to instantiate. What is going on with my autocomplete? We're going to call it storage inventory slot. And we're pretty much good to go. So I will go and grab that storage inventory slot and drag it into that prefab right there, or that variable rather, and drag in my content for the instantiation parent. Okay, so now under our Site of Grace Manager, let's go and duplicate one of these buttons. So I'm going to duplicate level up, and then I am going to call this storage. And I'm going to change the text to storage to reflect that. And what we're going to do is make it so when we hit this button, it's going to open our storage menu. So if we go to our on-click event, we probably already have an open menu. Yes, we do. So let's go to the Site of Grace Manager and let's open that up. And let's just basically copy one of these functions. But instead of opening the level up or the location menu, we're going to open up our newly created storage menu. So I'll call it public void open storage menu. And then we can copy and paste any of these functions because they're literally identical, but change the manager before to our newly created storage manager. So it'll be player UI storage manager dot open menu. Okay, cool. I'm going to save that, and I am going to go back into my prefab and make sure the on-click event is set to that newly created function. And then I'm going to untick my menu here and save my player UI. There we go. Now if I did forget something, drag in your right here scroll rect on your player inventory on your storage manager variable and save your player UI prefab. Otherwise, you might get an error when it does populate the inventory. Okay, but we're not even populating anything yet, so nothing to worry about right now. Go to the storage inventory slot and change your highlighted and selected color to something that you can actually see. And now go over to your player UI storage manager, and I'm going to make a header. I'm going to call this currently selected, or currently selecting from rather. Make a public bool is selecting from inventory. And if you're not selecting from your player's inventory, you're obviously selecting from the storage, but we just need to know what you're taking out of because we're going to change each title text that we're going to create according to that. So obviously if you're changing or selecting from your inventory, we're going to update the inventory's item title as you sift through your inventory from longsword to spear to helmet or whatever. And if you're taking it from storage, and actually let's not put this in open menu, we'll put it on populate inventory when we get there. But let's go back to the UI storage inventory slot and let's make a select item. And now let's go and say if player UI manager instance dot, and we can reference our storage manager, is selecting from inventory, well then we know we need to change the text fields of the player inventory. So basically make two text mesh pro variables here for the item currently being selected. Make one for your inventory and one for storage. And then we're going to change these titles here depending on it. So we could say player UI instance storage manager, and let's go over here and create those right now. I don't think we have them yet, do we? No, we don't. So under player UI storage manager, let's make a header for titles. And like I said, one for the inventory's item name and one for the storage manager's item name. Looking at a screenshot, this is how Elden Ring does it. Personally, what I think might be nicer is just making a single title and changing that depending on which inventory you're in. But this is Elden Ring in Unity, so I will do it Elden Ring's way. Player inventory, current item selected, and player storage, current item selected. I'll make the header up here too, just to keep this neater. I'm going to say inventories, and that looks serviceable. Let's continue. Now jumping back over to the UI storage inventory slot script, we can now say current item selected .text is equal to current item .item name. Now, what if the item that you're trying to select is null? Well, if the current item does equal null, we want to set whichever highlighted name we're after to nothing. So what we're going to do is, since we're going to do the inventory from the player first, we'll say player inventory at text is equal to this, and then obviously you want to return, and we're going to put this inside that if statement. Because if we're not actually in the player's inventory, and instead we are in the storage, and the item is null, we want to change the storage title. So let's just copy and paste everything up here and paste it down here, but instead of player inventory, we change it to the player storage item title. So I'm going to say player UI storage manager dot current item selected text from the player storage. And that looks good. All right, I'm going to save that. Now make sure you drag in your variables, and also I'm just realizing we have literally a select slot. So let's go and override that. I made select item like a fool. So delete select item, make sure you copy out that logic we just wrote, and override select slot. We're using our base class, we should utilize it, and then we're gonna call select slot, so the highlight will enable as well. And let's also call deselect slot on deselect. All right, go back into your player UI and make sure your title variables are there and save. Now I'm going to go over to populate inventory, and now we're going to say is selecting from player inventory is equal to true. Now let's yoink this entire populate shop inventory function from our player UI shop manager, and we're going to delete what we don't need and change what we do, because it's going to work identically to this. So we don't need to check for a shopkeeper. We don't need to check for closing the menu if there's no shopkeeper. We don't need to generate a shop. Now, we don't need to check if there's 0 items in your inventory. You should be able to open this menu anyway, but what we do need to do is compare the count of inventory slots we've already generated with the count of items in the player's inventory. So first, let's make a variable called local player, and if you want to, you can change this to shopkeeper and then rename it cheekily to player, and anything that was mentioned here as shopkeeper will now change to player. That's a nice way of shortcutting some stuff. And we're going to compare this to the player's items in their inventory, and obviously our new prefab is also make an array here for player inventory. I don't know if the recording was on, but it should have been here. But we're going to reference our storage inventory slot game object, and we're going to instantiate this at our parent. And then we're just going to check for all the children of that instantiation parent. So again, this is the exact same thing as the shop inventory. Make a private UI storage inventory slot for the player inventory instead of the shopkeeper's inventory. And we're going to say that is going to be equal to all of the children objects in the player inventory instantiation parent. And we're going to check for components UI storage inventory slot. So again, you can cheekily change this here. We can change the player inventory really quickly to shopkeeper by renaming it, or sorry, shop inventory. And then if we rename it again to player inventory, then everything that was renamed shop inventory previously, you can see is now name changed. Cool. So now obviously we're checking in our player inventory manager, not our AI character inventory manager, but we're copying and pasting this because we've already went over this and you guys know how to do it by now from the previous set of videos. So let's just reuse our logic. Nothing is changed here except you delete this last set category, and yeah, that should load up the inventory now. Now, before we move on, thank you to the gentleman in the Discord who pointed out that if you go back to my original combat stance state, I actually have a small error here. If we go to get new attack, you can see here I'm accidentally checking the max attack distance instead of the maximum attack angle here when we're supposed to be checking the angle. That's my bad. Very easy to make a typo. Thank you, my friend, for pointing that out. So I'm going to correct this right here, right now. This is on line 147 of my combat stance state if you didn't correct this yourself already. And I'm going to save that. Now, if we go into the game here and I open up the site of grace, I should be able to open up storage. Yes, I do. And there we go. The items do populate. Now, in the next video, we're going to work on actually selecting the first button that we're allowed to select, and then we're going to actually create functionality for switching items back and forth from storage and the player inventory. It should only take one more video to do this, and then we should be done. And then I'm going to move on to some AI stuff, And then if you guys actually want to see it too, we can do some client-side prediction for things like taking damage. So it doesn't appear if you have a delay, if you're playing with someone who's in a location that's very much so further away from you. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I hope you have a very lovely weekend. Thank you so much, my patrons, for supporting my work. It's because of you the series may continue. You have my sincerest gratitude. Thank you to the people who take the time to share and like the videos and share it via word of mouth. I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean it every time I say thank you. I appreciate you all very much. Have a good weekend. I'll see you next week.